I'm so happy that this trade just happened because a few days ago, I really wanted to cover the Eric Bledsoe trade, but I couldn't because I was sick, unfortunately. And I don't really like covering trades the day after. I feel like it's a little too late and you guys are just, kind of over the news at that point. So I posted something on my TikTok about it. But now there's kind of like a part 2 to this trade and it's slightly comical. So before we get to the content, I just want to remind you guys we're giving away multiple copies of NBA 2K22. All you have to do is be followed on Twitter or Instagram and you'll automatically enter for a chance to win. If you could also leave a like on this video, I'd greatly appreciate that. And now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Oh, yeesh, wrong shirt. But I had no time to change shirts today, man, because we just got some breaking news on a trade. It's not the biggest trade, but anything that makes fun of Patrick Beverley as a Laker fan, I am all for. So let's get to it, because after Patrick Beverley told Steph Curry after the Los Angeles Clippers signed Kawhi Leonard in 2019 that quote unquote the next 5 years are his, this entire situation is all the more laughable. So before we get to the trade that was made today, we need to talk about the trade that was made on August 15th, which is a trade, with all due respect to me, doesn't really make the most sense, but I'm just gonna bring it up to you guys regardless. So the very first trade is the Los Angeles Clippers traded Patrick Beverley, Rajon Rondo, and Daniel Oturu to the Memphis Grizzlies for guard Eric Bledsoe. So this has been a very strange trade, at least in my head, because I cannot figure out why on earth the Clippers would make such a trade. I looked at Eric Bledsoe's cap number and his contract is still on the books for another 2 years, and it's a pretty sizable sum of money. And when you look at Eric Bledsoe's statistics, the number one issue that he has had, at least in the NBA recently, is he is not even close to being a modern NBA point guard, and he has been a huge liability. Now, a lot of people think, and at least some people are hoping, that if he has a change of scenery and goes to a team where lanes would be a little bit more open and he is not really dependent upon to shoot threes as much, then he'll start to have some success. And I could very well see that being the case, but I think it's very strange that the Los Angeles Clippers said, yeah, this is the move we need to make. We need to trade a player that, with all due respect, as much as I dislike him, is pretty much our heart and soul on the defensive side of the ball. And I guess, I don't know, is Patrick Beverley a fan favorite? Let me know in the comment section down below. And a point guard who, in my opinion, is starting to trend towards journeyman territory in Rajon Rondo and Daniel Oturu, so we could bring in Eric Bledsoe. And again, from a contract perspective, this makes no sense to me because Patrick Beverley's contract was going to expire after this year. You now add on an additional year, and Rajon Rondo's contract wasn't that bad to begin with, so I really don't understand the reason why they would make this trade. Maybe they felt like Eric Bledsoe was a better fit for them, or maybe they approached Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and they both said that this is a trade that they wanted made. It's so hard for me to even find recent highlights of Eric Bledsoe, so I'm showing you like prime highlights of Eric Bledsoe if you notice. But that's the Los Angeles Clippers side of this. I think the Memphis Grizzlies actually made a phenomenal trade here, and to be honest, if I was the New Orleans Pelicans, I'd be extremely upset if I saw this trade, because the New Orleans Pelicans had to give up so much in order to move on from Eric Bledsoe. That's how difficult his contract was. I mean, sure, the Memphis Grizzlies did send Jonas Valanciunas, and the New Orleans Pelicans also got out of Steven Adams' contract and Eric Bledsoe's contract, but they also had to trade back 7 picks in order to do that, and they also had to give up a future top 10 protected Los Angeles Lakers pick, which, by the way, the Lakers pick is for the 2022 NBA draft, and I mean, call me be an optimist, but I do think that pick is actually going to fall outside of the top 10 based off of what I'm seeing from the Lakers, and hopefully they don't become the next coming of the 2013 Lakers, but that's my perception of this. Ja Morant loves Rajon Rondo, but I really wouldn't be surprised if Rajon Rondo gets bought out because he hasn't necessarily been a star player or a remarkable role player recently. He's had a fairly low box plus minus over the past 5 seasons, and he hasn't even been that effective from the field since the 2012 to 2013 season. He's kind of in that situation in his career where he's a great guy that you'd want in the locker room, very good in helping you develop a player, very good at dissecting film, which is why LeBron James loved having him on the Lakers a few years back. But apart from that, in terms of what Rajon Rondo could bring to a team in game-to-game situations, I just don't think it's there anymore. Now, here's my favorite part of this entire story. Patrick Beverley tweets out, "Grit and grind, let's go." And a few days later, after he puts his loyalty for the Grizzlies on full display, Patrick Beverley gets rerouted to another team because according to Adrian Wojnarowski, the Memphis Grizzlies are trading Patrick Beverley to the Minnesota Timberwolves in exchange for Jarrett Culver and Juan Hernan Gomez. Jarrett Culver is a player that has had a very bumpy start to his career. He was a lottery draft pick. Actually, he was a top 6 draft pick just literally 2 years ago in the 2019 NBA draft, and he hasn't really had the greatest opportunity to succeed. Now, bear in mind, he was playing for the Minnesota Timberwolves, so I'm willing to give the man a pass. He hasn't really played that many games, 97 games so far, averaging about 7.8 points per game off of 41% shooting and 29% from 3. Maybe the Minnesota Timberwolves saw more than enough and said, okay, we're moving on from this guy. And maybe the Memphis Grizzlies just kind of looked at Patrick Beverley and said, hey man, we don't want you in our locker room. This part doesn't really necessarily make that much sense to me either. I guess having a role player like Jarrett Culver sitting behind Ja Morant, maybe you could develop him a little bit. I'm very unsure because both of these players statistically, just looking at very basic statistics, aren't really plus players to have on your roster. I guess this was more of a means to get out of Patrick Beverley's contract, but Patrick Beverley is an expiring contract this year, so he is a valuable trade chip, and I expect him to be moved once again this year. Maybe, at least for the Timberwolves side of things, at least he could bring some sort of defensive presence to the Minnesota Timberwolves, because this is something that the Timberwolves have been lacking throughout their recent rebuild thus far. Anthony Edwards and D'Angelo Russell aren't necessarily known to be two-way players, so maybe adding Patrick Beverley into the mix could at least help them in that regard. So as much as I like clowning Patrick Beverley as a Los Angeles Lakers fan, I do think this trade was a very good move for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm very unsure why the Grizzlies would make this move. It's kind of funny because Patrick Beverley was beginning to embrace the fact that he was going to be the Tony Allen of the Memphis Grizzlies and bring back the grit and grind Grizzlies, but it appears as though that isn't going to happen anymore. So if you had to grade this trade, let me know what you would grade it in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.